Petroleum Industry Bill came into law last week, but the Minister of Petroleum is currently in negotiation with, amongst other stakeholders, the international oil companies, with regards to some of the concerns that they have of that bill. What are their big concerns?
Thanks, Sue. Well, first, the bill hasn't still been passed. It's still at the point of negotiations with the major oil players in Nigeria. And expectation is that within the next 3 to 6 months, the bill will be passed. But back to your particular question in terms of the major issues that the international oil companies have with the bill, there are several, Sue, but let me focus very quickly on 3.
Right.
The first is the requirement for all the licenses that currently exist to be relinquished, and then for the holders to reapply for those licenses upon the commencement of the Petroleum Industry Bill, which is popularly called PIB in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. Now, that clearly raises challenges, because the question is, why are we asking to have these licenses relinquished in the first instance? Mm-hmm. Does it mean that we may not get all the licenses back? And as you would expect, the industry, the international players are a bit concerned with that requirement. The second one, Sue, is the requirement for the joint venture operations, which are currently being run between the international oil companies and the Nigerian government, to be incorporated. Now, the whole reason behind the incorporation is because government has been very lax in terms of meeting its cash call under the existing joint venture arrangement, and they are hoping that by incorporation, they will get rid of the requirement for government to continue to fund its own share of operations in the industry. The question, though, is that the incorporation will require government to continue to hold in excess of 50% of the new companies, which we simply call the IJVs. And very quickly, there are 2 issues with that. First, because the government company, essentially, there is the World Bank negative pledge that will go with that. So is it really I'm able to go out and raise funding as intended? The jury is out on that. Secondly, as a government company, it will be liable to the Public Procurement Act and the consequences in terms of the delay in awarding contracts within the industry. That also is a major concern of the international oil companies operating in Nigeria at the moment. But and finally, is the fiscal provisions.
Continue, Victor, sorry.
Now, what's happened so far, if I stay with the tax as an example?
Right, Victor, the big concern, I guess, for foreign investors is really what this spells for the outlook for Nigeria's oil sector, because realistically, can local providers actually provide the means and the capacity to service the demand of Nigeria's oil sector?
If we look at what's existing at the moment, Sue, the answer would be no. Because we haven't got the capacity as we speak within Nigeria for the local operators to provide all the needs of the industry. And that's why you find in Nigeria that we're very dependent on imported services. However, you've got to understand why government is pushing this particular initiative. Because the oil industry has been in Nigeria now for over 50 years, and we still haven't got a local footprint, if you may. And therefore, the intention here is to try to use the new changes being introduced by the PIB to get the local industry to take off, and for Nigeria to begin to be a hub, if you like, of oil operations within the West African sub-region.
Victor, this is such a big issue and we don't have much time, but I do want to ask you about the impact on other sectors, and part of the act that was saying that oil companies will have to put 10% of their annual profit, store them in Nigerian banks. What are your thoughts around this?
I think that will help to generate activities within the banking sector, especially in the financing sector of it. Because what we'd expect is that with Nigerian players coming into more active participation, the more funds you have in the financial sector, the more they can borrow to finance their operations. So certainly you would expect to see a whole lot more activity being generated as a consequence of domiciling 10% of their net profits within Nigeria. But as you'd appreciate, the more important thing is actually in developing the oil service sector, where Nigerians are supposed to play a very key role. And the expectation is that by the provisions we have currently in the PIB, we'll be able to actually get a very active industry around the services in the oil sector.